this session. Kia ora, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. Thank you very much for being with us today. This is called People Power, Not Waste to Energy, Defeating False Solutions. And we're super pleased to have everybody here today. I might be distracted because I'm administering this, and so I have to let people in as well. And I'm not as au fait with Zoom as I should be. But I'd like to just open with a karakia. I'd like to acknowledge tangata whenua of Aotearoa. I'd like to acknowledge their rangatiratanga and their kaitiaki of the lands, the waters, the mountains, the streams, and all of the whenua and the moana of Aotearoa. He karakia tēnei. Nau mai tēnei rā, me ona hua katoa, he whakaro pai, ka whakato, he hua pai, ka tipu mai, he paina mō te katoa. Haumi e hui e taiki. So, by way of introduction, this webinar is around the Break Free from Plastics and Plastic Free July False Solutions Exposed campaign. And that campaign is a regionally coordinated campaign in the Asia Pacific region focused on debunking false solutions to the plastic pollution that is proliferating in the region. And the campaign is aiming to influence governments to stop supporting false solutions, especially waste to energy projects and other forms of plastic burning that disproportionately affect local communities across the region. And we've just had Matt Perryman, who's joined us on the call. Matt is coordinating that campaign. So kia ora, Matt, and thanks for all your work on this. So the context of this is we've got, we've just won this amazing campaign in Feilding, and many of you on the call today I can see are from the wonderful community of Aorangi Feilding, including our first two speakers. But literally in the same week that we won that campaign, the New Zealand government and Air New Zealand announced $1.5 million worth of funding to two companies. One of them is called Fulcrum Bioenergy and another called LanzaTech, to investigate so-called sustainable aviation fuel using waste and waste to energy processes that in what appear to be very similar kinds of projects to the Feilding proposal, particularly Fulcrum Bioenergy, because they're using a gasification process. So we are today weaving together the local stuff, the local struggle, starting with Feilding and with Mana Whenua, with the globals. And we are really fortunate. We've got someone from Gary, Indiana, who's going to talk about their struggle with Fulcrum Bioenergy, because they are actually struggling against the very company that has been awarded this money and has got a project that they're trying to get going in Gary. And finally, we are really fortunate. We've got a speaker from the Break Free from Plastics Petrochemical Working Group who's going to put all of this stuff into the wider context of plastics pollution and plastics production. So I will introduce all of our speakers individually as they speak. So we're going to talk from Feilding first, and then we're going to go international. So first up, we've got Angela Baker, who is a community and climate activist who's been leading the Feilding Against Incineration's work to stop the proposed waste to energy pyrolysis plant. Angela, to her credit, put her hand up in November 2021 when we found out about this project, and has really helped to instigate the community fight that ultimately was successful in defeating the project. So over to you, Angela. I'm just going to spotlight you. There you go. And turn my spotlight up and turn over to you. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Kia ora koutou. Firstly, I want to acknowledge the amazing group of people who were involved in fighting this battle against Bioplant, establishing their pyrolysis plant in Feilding. We won this particular battle through perseverance and support from a lot of amazing people, not least of which was Val and Zero Waste Network. There were many reasons we opposed the proposal, and I probably don't need to go into detail with any of these today, as I imagine that would be preaching to the converted. But briefly, our concerns were the increasing evidence of toxic emissions from such plants, the fact that this type of technology was failing and being legislated out in the Northern Hemisphere, The fact that this method of dealing with waste would take us further away from our carbon targets, the fact that this would de-incentivise waste reduction and activities further up the waste hierarchy, the fact that it was not a circular economy solution and that a zero waste alternative would contribute many benefits to the community. And my particular bee in the bonnet, the fact that there was every indication that this particular company was completely shonky, but more about that later. Perhaps equally disturbing as the proposal itself was what happened in our local and regional councils. I'll cover this in some detail, as I suspect that what happened with us is not unusual in terms of how many councils around the country handle things. But firstly, here's a bit of a timeline, again, probably not atypical for these kinds of proposals. Bioplant Manawatu began developing a relationship with Hamish War, our infrastructure manager at the Manawatu District Council, and one representative of Ngāti Kauwhata. We don't know when these first overtures began. We do know that a letter of support from the previous CEO of Manawatu District Council was written in November 2019. In April 2021, Bioplant lodged a resource consent application for discharge to air with Horizons Regional Council. At some stage prior to this, Manawatu District Council discussed this proposal in a workshop, that is confidentially in committee, and a straw poll was taken with the majority approving it. We don't know when this occurred. Meantime, the local community were oblivious. The Zero Waste Network ran a webinar about the proposal in late November, and from that, a small local group was formed to begin the long, tedious process of opposing the proposal. At times, I marvel that such a small group of random strangers, united only by our passion to stop this thing, were able to pull together to coordinate opposition so effectively. We hit the ground running, and group members had presented to both councils and set up a Facebook group prior to the Christmas shutdown. We didn't have the time or energy to formalise our structure, and we were very lucky to have a group who gelled so well and were able to trust each other. Thus, the campaign organising was somewhat anarchic, but was able to be nimble in terms of planning activities. While this approach wouldn't work well in a lot of situations, it worked really well for us. Our organising group consisted of only 5 or 6 people, and while things were a bit thin on the ground at times, we were able to tag team with different people stepping up when others needed to pull back. From the time the proposal was first covered in a press story, Manawatu District Council denied being in partnership with Bioplant, which is how Bioplant described their relationship, admitting only to an agreement to lease them land next to the resource recovery park, which is less than 3 kilometres from the centre of Feilding. They denied any other involvement, and very few documents were provided to us from our local government information request. However, one email from this request showed that MDC also had a deal to supply mixed municipal waste to the plant. Other very pertinent documents, for example, related to land use designation, dated November 2021 and January 2022, were not provided as part of our information request. I find that very disturbing. Their decision regarding the land issues was that the proposed pyrolysis plant was essentially the same as the resource recovery park, so didn't require any additional consents or notification. This defies belief and makes you wonder about the expertise of the consultancy businesses that councils engaged for such assessments. 184 pages of documentation to come to this decision. The decision was not publicly notified. Meantime, Horizons Regional Council accepted the application for consent and began processing it. A relatively new graduate was put in charge of the application, though was supervised by a senior staff member. Perhaps this accounts for the fact that such an inadequately documented application was accepted and allowed to proceed. The process descriptions and diagrams in their resource consent application were incomplete, lacked detail, and contained contradictory information, sometimes within consecutive paragraphs. We applaud Environment Canterbury for sending back the Cyril application for the Waimate proposal at the outset. We only wish that Horizons had taken the same approach. The proposal was not discussed in any open Manawatu District Council meeting by elected councillors until the 17th of March 2021, when councillors voted in support of it, 2022, when councillors voted in support of a submission supporting Bioplant's resource consent application written by their infrastructure manager. 3 councillors spoke against this, and another spoke of serious concerns about the decision-making process and the lack of consultation. At that meeting, the infrastructure manager stated that the submission writing process to Horizons would provide all the opportunity for consultation that's required. To us, this was an appalling statement, given the potential for harm of this plant. During this discussion, incidentally, one councillor stated that he was impressed by the proposal and he knew it would be a good thing because he'd read all about it in the Feilding Herald, our local weekly freebie paper. Such is the level of critique of some of our elected representatives. Another example of deliberate withholding of information was in relation to the MDC's Waste Management and Minimisation draft plan, which came out shortly after the Horizon submissions closed. One would think that this would be a good opportunity for MDC to consult with residents about the proposed plan, given that the plant would be dealing with such a large proportion of Manawatu's waste. But no, there was vague mention of it a couple of times in quite understated ways in the waste assessment document. For example, they said under a heading Energy from Waste, Council has been approached by a private sector company who wishes to convert waste to energy via a pyrolysis plant on the Manawatu Resource Recovery Park site in Feilding. Conversations are ongoing in regards to this venture. That doesn't give any hint of a signed lease and a supply to an agreement to supply waste. You could almost say it was a deliberate deception. Clearly, a more honest statement would have been something like, we are strongly supportive of this project and have agreements in place to facilitate its establishment, so long as it gains resource consent. In essence, this project, while it wasn't a formal partnership with MDC, was enabled and facilitated by MDC in complete secrecy with regards to our local community. And while we've won this battle in terms of the pyrolysis plant not going ahead, MDC seem to have learned nothing about consultation and have embarked on another Think Big project, which will involve bringing in food waste from all over the lower North Island. While this doesn't have the same level of environmental consequences, their approach regarding lack of consultation and lack of exploration of alternatives has not changed. Interestingly, their application to the Ministry for the Environment for funding for this new project was underway before Bioplant had formally withdrawn their resource consent application. So they're not big on loyalty. Anyway, coming back to the shonkiness of Bioplant. Bioplant persisted in using terms such as circular economy, green solutions, and biochar inappropriately, and their presentations were full of greenwashing. But even more disturbing than the greenwashing was the obfuscation and downright dishonesty. These revelations would have been quite amusing if it wasn't for the danger of their proposal being given the green light. Briefly, here are some of the worst examples discovered by various members and supporters, and all but the last were further researched by National Business Review for the 2 articles that they ran. Turns out that the patent, which Bioplant were hiding behind in terms of not being able to provide proprietary information, expired many years ago. Another thing, 20% of the shareholding of the New Zealand parent company of Bioplant Manawatu were small investors. Interestingly, they were mostly Pacifica people living in South Auckland, and most likely were parishioners of the Seventh-day Adventist pastor who owned 80% shareholding of Bioplant New Zealand, which owned 20% of Bioplant Manawatu. I find it deeply disturbing that people in this low income area were influenced to invest in such a shonky scheme. Bioplant's application heavily referenced a plant in Dandenong, Australia. It was not until a few months before the hearing that they admitted that it was not yet operating. Sometime after the hearing, the National Business Review revealed that they had not in fact even applied for resource consent for that plant, let alone begun building it or operating it. Once this had been outed, Bioplant began putting more emphasis on the Mangyeong plant in South Korea, which was established in 2009. They included amongst their documentation a lab report, which was supposedly from samples from supposedly from samples from this plant, but National Business Review revealed that it appeared that this document had been photoshopped, having a different letterhead and format than what was used by the certification laboratory at the time the certificate was dated. And what seemed like it might have been the final nail in the coffin in terms of their credibility, Andrew Rollington, our expert witness, found a South Korean newspaper article several months after the hearing that stated that the Mangyeong plant had been closed down in 2018 as it was an environmental abomination. One of the downsides of Bioplant withdrawing their application before the hearing, which was due to be reconvened this month, was that we never got to see Bioplant being challenged about these things by the commissioners. At no stage did they respond to any of these revelations. A more important downside of their withdrawal is that it looked like the commissioners would probably decline consent, given that all three of Horizon's experts at that final stage stated that they could not recommend consent being granted. It would have carried much more weight if that ruling was made by the commissioners rather than Bioplant choosing to withdraw their application. And it does seem a pity because I think that would have helped the other campaigns that are occurring in New Zealand at the moment. On the upside, we no longer have to put in voluntary time, worry, and financial resources into fighting this battle. In conclusion, we should be able to depend on our local authorities to sift out applications based on false solutions. But in our case, this didn't happen. It shouldn't be up to Ma and Pa residents to provide the safety net for the community. For us, that's another battle to take on. Challenging this whole process is another battle to take on once we've recovered from this one. Thank you.
Kia ora, Angela. Thank you very, very much. Really appreciate that. I think one of the things that you have highlighted so well throughout this whole process is the bizarre and disgusting dispensation of any democratic process out of this. So we're going to turn over, actually to Meriti, who is with you. And I'm going to put the spotlight back on to Meriti, and I will introduce Meriti Taipana. Kia ora, Meriti. So Meriti holds the environmental portfolio for her hapu, Tauhiri Wakanui, and her marae, Aorangi. She has been a conduit between the National Regeneration Not Incineration campaign and local Mana Whenua in Aorangi Feilding. So working with us to figure out our strategies and how we can best amplify and support the views of Mana Whenua. She is a staunch spokesperson for her people and for their role as kaitiaki of their whenua and awa. So Meriti, over to you. Kia ora.
Tēnā koe Val, nā mihi nui kia koe mō tō pānui kia hau. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Hi everybody, greetings everybody. Thank you for having me on. I am from Aorangi Marae and I am able to represent my people of Tauhiri Wakanui, which is a hapu or sub-tribe of the broader iwi, which is Ngāti Kauwhata. We have three main hapu here in this area of Feilding, and Aorangi is one of the most active maraes, must say. because I'm from there. I wanted to, yes, I wanted to also thank Angela and her group of peers fighters, and how they shared information with me and allowed me to update myself on what was happening, because we sort of came into it later on in the piece, or well, I did anyway. I think there was somebody in the iwi who they had approached. There wasn't exactly the person who was supposed to speak for all of us. That's what we've got to be careful amongst our people, is we've got to be careful who speaks for who, because not one person speaks for everybody. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of whakapapa, because there's a whakapapa or a genealogy, you know, that when things happen, there's always things that happen beforehand that create what's happening now. And so this situation also has a whakapapa. So up to the early 1800s, the Kauwhata block on which Feilding is built was a bush-covered virgin land where there were swamps, wetlands, and healthy waterways. There were several Māori villages placed alongside the Orowa River, and many of these areas were utilised as pātaka kai, which is food resources, for the Māori who lived there, including the repo or wetlands in the Bunnythorpe area. And the Bunnythorpe area is a little satellite village out of Palmerston North, and we're all in fairly close proximity with each other. Palmerston North is a bigger city, Feilding is a town, and Bunnythorpe is the village. That's between the two of us, Palmerston North and Bunnythorpe. So Ngāti Kauwhata migrated here from the Waikato to Otaki in the 1800s, and later settled in the Manawatu and Awahuri. There were Māori tribes already settled in these areas, like the Rangitane people and the Ngāti Apa people. And in time, we worked out a way to live together. We've intermarried and joined together our resources. But in the late 1840s, 1850s, came the settlers who set about clearing the land, draining the wetlands and swamps. In fact, this activity escalated after the treaty was signed. As in New Zealand, we have a treaty between descendants of the Crown and the tangata whenua, the iwi take or the indigenous people. So this was the beginning of a completely alien and different way of life, but the total destruction of forest ecosystems and the end of traditional Māori life. Māori knew what this destruction would have done to the forest ecosystems and their food sources, but little did anyone know that this practice, which was being enacted all over the New World and all over New Zealand during the 1800s, and the colonisation of the New World, that it would cause change in future climate patterns. But the change went by unnoticed. So a lot went on in the 1800s in this area, especially after the Treaty of Waitangi was signed. Colonisation of the land by the settler government, the New Zealand Company, and the native land courts was in full swing. And somehow they saw the treaty as permission to grab as much land as possible and disenfranchise as much Māori from their land and communities as possible. And this happened at Feilding, and it happened all over New Zealand. Our marae were all but decommissioned, and people who lived in their papakainga, that's their small marae villages, were moved out eventually. The land was no more itself, but stripped bare and sown with grass, and it was now a commodity and an economic unit, and that's how land was seen. So it was seen in a totally different way to how we saw it. We call the land Papatuanuku because we see it as the mother, you know. It provides all the reason why we're still living on the planet, I suppose. Only just. And Feilding was then, after that, established as a farm town. And it seems that Feilding is becoming more industrial, while Palmerston North, just down the road, is going green. Palmerston North has pushed the Kiwi Rail Hub. The Kiwi Rail Hub is another huge industrial development happening, and it's going into one of our rural green villages. I was brought up in Bunnybrook, so I know what that place was like. And so it's going to be a development that takes up to 175 hectares of beautiful rural land, including some wetlands. This will impact on us at Aorangi, because we're just up the road, due to the increase in heavy traffic going from the Kiwi Rail worksite. And the link, there is a link that you might want to have a look at called Mana Whenua Ngāti Kauwhata, ongoing headache with proposed rail freight development. And that's from our Māori channel, Te Kārere. Feilding is expanding its industrial capacity, making room for all sorts of timber, heavy farming machinery, cow and deer slaughterhouses, freezing facilities, and all industries that support the farming community. And it is the Mana Whenua District Council that is applying for these waste-to-energy facilities and offering to build them on the Kauwhata block. The Kauwhata block is the subject of a treaty claim as well. I mean, no one can say how successful that will be, but it's still the subject of a treaty claim. It was taken under the Public Works Act in 1864, and the link is under the information there is under the Public Works Act 1864 and subsequent laws. Māori and European lands could be acquired for roads, railways, and other public works, sometimes without compensation. And some Māori land was targeted for compulsory acquisition in preference to nearby Pākehā land. So our people, the iwi, we are fighting on all fronts. You know, we're fighting for the protection of our land, our waters, our own people, but we have different collectives that deal with that. And to be honest, we have to get organised, and we can't just be sad and be complacent about it. We do have to get organised and get a little bit more proactive. So Aorangi and Kauwhata and the majority submitted against the pyrolysis bioplant in 2022 and 2023. And we were in support of the Feilding Against Incineration community group protest as well. And that's Angela's group. And if you check out a news clip from Te Kārere Aorangi, our Marae Chair Mehana Jury plainly outlined why we were protesting against such a pyrolysis plant. And the link is Tahuri Wakanui Uri proposed pyrolysis plant YouTube. And Bridget Bell of Kauwhata Marae and our Māori ward councillor had also submitted a very strong rebuttal to the bioplant. Mason Jury, another one of our elders, also put in a strong submission, raising the very real health risks that would affect our community. And I remember that bioplant had a health risk assessment done by somebody living in Auckland. And I thought to myself, that's not even a proper health assessment. How can you know what is going to happen here from Auckland? And I felt that Mason seemed to be our health expert, and he knew more about it than I would have read on that assessment. I also put something in and supported others regarding environmental damage and carbon footprint. I lobby the climate change and environment ministers and the Prime Minister. Well, I lobby her first, and she sent it back to the Environment Minister. Otherwise, they pretty much ignore you. But once it came from her, he did write to me. We met with the co-leader of the Māori Party, who raised it once again with David Parker, the Environment Minister. So we started to weave our responses together to make a strong stand. But it's, yeah, and that was important. The reason behind our protests were to do with the continuous disrespect for our wāhi tapu, our sacred places, our places of spiritual significance, and that's the river and then some of the land and waterways. The pollution that historically and currently had been put into the waterways and whenua from the freezing works, the carpet factory from Tierra and other industries, farming industries, farms, runoff, has caused deterioration of the Oroa river and affected its life force or its mauri. And now the Manawatu District Council were planning to build a facility that would not only burn municipal waste, plastics and eventually tyres, but there would be gaseous emissions as a negative byproduct of the pyrolysis process. I mean, I'm not an expert, I have to keep reading up about what it's going to affect and how things are going to affect something else, because it's a chain reaction. If successful, the MDC would have offered to service the whole of the lower North Island, which would bring everyone's waste into our area from Wellington to Taranaki and in between for pyrolysis. Yeah, and this would be demanding to our land and our area, and was definitely a deal breaker for Ngāti Kauwhata. The council did not seem that open about it at the beginning, but once we had a whiff of it happening in our area, we were concerned and we got involved. I think there's something about the Resource Management Act where you don't have to notify, or it's first and first served sort of policy. And so, you know, a lot of the community didn't know it was happening. We were concerned and we got involved. We had people who were not really aware of the impacts of such a facility. And of course, they believed the greenwashed version. But the difference is that we now have someone appointed to be like an environmental watchdog and to alert the marae and to keep them informed as much as possible, and to be able to rally our people together, also to keep neutral so as not to get pulled into greenwashing talks about any new waste to energy projects. I mean, so far that's me, but I have to get my other colleagues from the other different collectives so that I can liaise with them. A big industrial waste to energy facility should be way down the line and should be brought in for the right reasons, not for economical reasons, as it could end up to be more of a liability in the long run. There does need to be more consultation with the community and more consultation with the right spokespeople in the iwi. And we want to be listened to and not just have a box tick, because a member of the applicant group has been mates with a local Māori person and goes to his marae and then says, oh, I spoke to the chief of Ngāti Kauwhata the other day and he's okay with it. I go to his marae and that there needs to be meetings with the right people in an iwi grouping. Iwi want to have more say and participation in what happens in their rohi. And in this area, it is with the marae trustees and appointed mandated people. We have different collectives to deal with different issues, because we don't only deal with environmental issues. Our different collectives are fighting on all fronts. We've just finished a big protest about getting our own councillor on the council. So we have different areas that we're sort of negotiating in and fighting in. We have values entrenched in the lands that we are in. We see ourselves as the kaitiaki of the lands we have settled. And when it comes to the changing or destruction of a natural entity like our river, even the taking of gravel from the riverbed, like the removal of sand or changing of the river direction and flow, or putting sewage on the land or in the river, when these things happen, we are all affected in our health and our lives, and that goes for all who live here. So now in July 2023, we do not have to put up with the pyrolysis. Thank goodness, thanks to the efforts of our community collectives and hopefully some of our collectives. As the application was ultimately declined and the applicant themselves withdrew from the hearings this month, as well as everyone is very happy about that. We have heard the MDC has now applied for Feilding to be the central rubbish hub again. They have applied for the anaerobic digestion plant ecogas to be here. And we know about this early, so I'm preparing our people and marae in case we have another big hearing process to go through. So it's another whawhai. Nō reira, e te iwi, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou.
Oh, kai te mihi, Meriti. Nā mihi nui ki a koe mō tō kōrero, mō tō matauranga tino pai rawatu. Yeah, thank you so much, Meriti, and thanks also for the whakapākea o nā kupu katoa. So thanks for translating some of those kupu for particularly for our international guests here. We have lots of te reo Māori words that are in very, very common usage amongst pretty much everyone across the population in New Zealand. And that's increasing, and that's a wonderful thing, but can make it, difficult for people who are not as familiar. So thank you, Meriti, that's fantastic. So I'm going to turn over to Valerie Denny. I'm going to introduce Valerie. Valerie is a member for Gary Advocates for Responsible Development, which is GARD. And that's a nonprofit citizens organization working to promote economic development. Sorry, I'll just remove the spotlight there. And I'm going to put the spotlight on to Valerie. Kia ora. GARD is a nonprofit citizens organization working to promote economic development that prioritizes environmental justice and sustainability in the city of Gary, Indiana. Gary is a center for steelmaking in the United States and a minority community with a long legacy of environmental pollution. GARD provides Gary residents with accurate and up-to-date environmental information affecting their community. It reviews and monitors proposed new developments and engages local residents in taking action to oppose projects and permits that are not protective of community health and the environment. It also takes legal action when necessary. Valerie herself is a board member of GARD and a longtime community activist. For 25 years. She headed Valerie Denny Communications, which is a public relations firm specializing in nonprofit advocacy and issues campaigns in Chicago. For the last 10 years, she served as a communications consultant on various campaigns with the International Pollution Elimination Network, also known as IPEN, including its Toxics Plastics campaign and its Lead Paint Elimination campaign. Kia ora and welcome, Valerie. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me, and good afternoon to everyone. It's very thrilling to be speaking from Chicago to people all over, and especially to those of you in New Zealand. I listened with great interest to the Feilding story, and congratulations on that victory. It's truly a marvelous thing, and I know you're not done. We seem to never be done, but you have to take your victories where you get them, and it does seem like you had a very good one. So congratulations. Unfortunately, your story sounds very similar to ours. That is, I am part of a group called GARD. We are opposing a waste-to-energy plant proposed by Fulcrum Bioenergy, which I understand is also from the introduction, making an investment in New Zealand. Let me say a couple words about Gary. You may not be familiar with the geography, but Gary sits at right in the middle of the country at the southern end of Lake Michigan. It's about 40 miles from Chicago, a major US city, but that whole southern edge of Lake Michigan going east from Chicago is a long-term industrial area in the United States. It remains the center of steelmaking in the US, even though it employs many, many fewer people than it used to. As Valerie mentioned, it's a majority minority community. 80% of the residents approximately are African American. It is a very poor community. Despite years of industrial investment in the area, there's been the industrial areas in the United States, especially in the Midwest, have been hollowed out, and Gary is no exception. And but those industries have also left quite a legacy of pollution. And Gary is in the state of Indiana. Indiana is an extremely conservative state, and the state is majority white. And in many cases, this area, Gary and the surrounding areas, have been viewed as quote unquote sacrifice zones, places where you can locate industry because it's already ruined, because nobody's going to care, because nobody's going to fight back much. And so we come to the story of Fulcrum. Much like the folks in Feilding, no one knew that there was such a plant proposed or in the works until some very sharp people who were monitoring some city hall processes noticed that there was discussion about a plant coming to Gary to be located on the shore of Lake Michigan that was a fuel to energy plant by Fulcrum Bioenergy. People got active. Let me just say at the beginning, we're very much in the middle of this, and the outcome is not certain in any sense. We a small group of people, again, as in the Feilding case, a group of 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of us, all incredibly engaged, longtime activists of one sort or another, started bringing the issue up and trying to raise awareness of the problems with this type of plant. What Fulcrum is proposing in Gary is a gasification plus Fischer-Tropsch system. Gasification, as probably most of you know, is a version, is very similar to pyrolysis. It's just the temperatures aren't quite as hot. Their objective is to take garbage from 2 sites, which they have not named in the area, process that garbage into some type of feedstock. And I'm vague because they're vague, and we don't know all the details, and then bring that feedstock into a plant where it will be gasified, turned into syngas, and then the Fischer-Tropsch process is designed to turn it into some type of fuel. Now, they've had a major PR campaign, and that campaign is not just waste to fuel, but waste to jet fuel. The claim is that they're going to take garbage and turn it into jet fuel. And it sounds exciting, frankly, to people. It sounds like it solves a problem. wow, we could be at the front end of technology in our community. And of course, it would make, they're saying they would have 120 jobs, which, while not a huge number in a depressed area where people badly need jobs, feels like a lot, and something you should never, in essence, something you should never turn down. So the company has come in, they have spread a lot of money around. They won the city council of Gary over to it, and the mayor. They got an air permit. Air permits are granted by a state agency called the Indiana Department of Environmental Management. They got an air permit, and it kind of looked like they were on their way. They held parties in the park. There was the press and who wrote about them was, of course, completely uncritical because it just sounded great. And I mean, I can even understand the appeal if you don't know anything. So we started, a small group of people started trying to make some noise about this. We put together a report why this is a bad deal for Gary. One of the beautiful things about the community is that we, if you do hold a press conference, the media all come, and they're uncritical with Fulcrum, and they were uncritical with us. And they have reported, and they do report our side of the story quite well, actually. So we have found media activities to be an extremely good way. When we issued this report, we got a lot of media attention, front page of the newspaper. And then we had the opportunity, when a company gets an air permit, you can challenge that permit, and you can file a petition to have that permit reviewed and even revoked. And so we did that, and we filed an initial petition, and then at that point, a legal firm, a pro bono legal firm here in Chicago called Environmental Law and Policy Center, took up our case for us. And that actually has been one of the most important things for us to happen, because now we do have a petition in front of a judge opposing this air permit. The stories about the permitting process in Feilding sounded very familiar. The permit is shoddy beyond belief. They make claims about air emissions, but never provide the calculations, which is actually required by law, on which those air emissions are projections are based. They provide no information about what the actual feedstock is. They have said in other contexts that the feedstock will be some combination of carbon materials and up to 30% plastic. But as we all know, garbage on a day-to-day basis varies tremendously. And so what actually will be the composition of the feedstock will also have a huge effect on what the emissions are. And so we have filed this petition basically asking that the air permit be revoked on the basis that they have not provided these calculations. They haven't made public any independently verifiable calculations as to emissions or or sufficient information about their feedstock. Now, let me just say this is a long shot. It is not a given that we'll win at all. We're in a very conservative state. The environmental agency has basically said we're in the business of bringing business here, not keeping business out. So there is every effort made to make it possible for a business. Just as a side note, we were recently at a public meeting about another issue with this state agency. It was a permit renewal where the company had a number of violations, and we were saying, how can you possibly renew their permit with all these violations? And it turned out in the course of the meeting, they told us they've never not renewed a permit. So this is an uphill battle legally, but I would say one of the chief benefits it's provided us is the ability to get into the newspaper over and over and over again. We're able to publicize different moments that occur, and it gives us legitimacy that we have this legal firm who is highly respected, and that they have taken up our case is been extremely important for us. Just looking at my notes, I would say we still have a really long way to go. This is such a new issue for people. People do not understand. The primary thing that people in Gary are concerned about, though, is their health and the impact, the long-term impact and the legacy of pollution in the area. And that is widely understood. And people are willing to be activated on that issue. The larger issues of plastics and plastics use is frankly less important to them. But plastics' role in creating pollution, in the toxic content of plastics, and being able to talk about how these processes will release those toxics is what we're talking about, because that's what resonates for people. And but we have a lot of work to do yet. It's a community where people have a lot of things on their mind. And in many cases, the environment has come as a lower priority over the years. If for some reason our petition is not successful, there will still be a number of hurdles that the plant has to go through. It is not, there's nothing in the ground yet. That's always good when you can be fighting before there's something in the ground. There will be a number of permits that they will have to go through at the city level. A very good thing that's happened is there was an election earlier this year in Gary. There's a new mayor who is on the record as opposing the plant. So he hasn't come into office yet. They have a very long lame duck period. But when he comes into office, we're really hopeful. And we have some members of the city council now who were elected who also oppose it. In fact, one of our members is now a member of the city council. So some good things and also some very, very difficult things. And nobody quite knows the outcome yet. Our goal now is to broaden public awareness, to really sit down with the new elected officials and talk to them. One of the other challenges has been that because they have a lot of money to give out, some environmental groups have taken that money, and now those groups appear in their promotional materials because, of course, they are claiming that they're a green business. So we need, we're in the process now of getting in touch with those groups, really trying to dig in and have, what do you call it, adult conversations with them about why their approach we think is wrong and why we think it's bad for the community. And so that's a priority. Expanding our reach in the community, developing more community leaders, and educating the local politicians. That's all on the agenda right now, concurrent with pursuing this petition. So I think that's kind of where things stand. And course, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
That's great. Thank you so much, Valerie. There's so much in what you have to say. I feel like, yeah, we need to have an international sort of New Zealand, Gary, Indiana alliance.
That'd be lovely.
Yeah, to fight Fulcrum together. We are much behind you all in terms of where things are going, but it is shocking that the New Zealand government has kind of gone down this path. So sort of ignorantly, so sort of without even the most basic sort of internet search that they could have done to find out what the heck was going on with both with the process and with this particular company. So I feel, yeah, I feel, you know, excited to meet you and to know about your work, but also, yeah, disheartened that we've got to go through this all again. But we'll come back. I want to give Swathi some time and space to put this all into context. So I just want to introduce our final speaker. Swathi Seshadri is the Director of Programs and the Team Lead for Oil and Gas at the Center for Financial Accountability in India. That's an NGO that seeks to critically analyze, document, and challenge the current developmental impact of financial institutions in India and South Asia. It supports communities, movements, and people in India to hold financial institutions to account for any negative impacts of their operations and to support and give voice to alternative perspectives on development and the role and responsibility of finance in India. Swathi's specific area of work are on the plastics lifespan from oil and gas exploration and extraction, petrochemical production, plastics production and consumption, and waste to energy projects. So Swathi, thank you so much for being with us. She got the short end of the straw. It's very early in the morning, so thank you particularly for getting up and being part of this. Over to you for your kōrero. I'm just going to spotlight you so that everyone, that didn't quite work. Are you spotlighted for other people? No.
No.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you for inviting. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Great. Thanks for inviting me to this conversation. Hearing all of you has been extremely inspiring, especially all of you in New Zealand and of course in Chicago as well. We know that these are very difficult fights, and hearing your stories also inspires us to do more of the work that we do. I'll get to the big picture, but just to say that in India, we have 75 waste to energy projects, either already being implemented or in various stages of implementation. And one city itself, which already has 4 incinerators, plans to put up a total of 7. So this is a massive fight. There is a massive industry behind it. I think it's the collective fight that will really help us win it all. But here I've been requested to speak on the wider context of where is all this coming from. And after all that very inspiring conversation, I'm sorry, I'm going to take you all through some slides with a lot of data in it to help put into context, where the plastic at the end of it all comes from. So I'm just going to share screen. And I'm going to have a series of graphs, I'm sorry, which might bore you all because it's not as nearly half as interesting as the work all of you are doing. I hope you can see my screen. Yeah, all right. So I think the first message I'd like to communicate here is that over 99% of plastics comes from fossil fuels, and it could be oil, gas, or coal, depending on which part of the world we are from. In India, for example, it's mostly oil. In Africa, it's also coal. And then, of course, in different parts, it's also gas. So I'm just going to go through some interesting figures that the International Energy Agency put out in its 2018 report on the future of petrochemicals to see what it's going to look like, and frankly, to draw a scarier picture than possibly where we currently are. So petrochemicals are becoming the biggest driver of global oil consumption, with the shift to EVs in terms of vehicular energy, in terms of other kinds of energy. The shift to renewable energy means that fossil fuels don't have the same market as they had in the past. And obviously the big oil companies and the big coal companies are not going to sit
quietly watching their, profit margins fade away. And instead, what they're doing is, while they're refining or cracking gas, for energy earlier, what they will do or are already starting to do is really move oil refining, gas and coal cracking to materials. And of course, by materials, we mean petrochemicals. So what we're seeing increasingly the world over is that we have big refineries who used to produce petroleum and who now have integrated their refineries to also produce petrochemicals as and when the market patterns change. So it takes less than a week for a refinery to switch from refining for petroleum to refining for petrochemicals. The difference between refining for energy and refining for materials. This is more resilient. Oil companies have agreed and in fact admitted that such a model of production is far more resilient and keeps their profit margins intact. And because if they only depend on petroleum, then with the changing market scenario, they are not able to tide over the shift to renewables and EVs. So currently, for example, we are seeing that petrochemicals accounts for 14% of total demand of oil and 8% of gas. It's understood that in the coming years, this could reach even up to 50% of the of fossil fuels being used for petrochemicals. Among all the materials that have grown over the past few years, right from 1970 to 2015, the blue line right on top is that of plastics. And so we're seeing a very sustained and continuing increase of plastic as a material growing more than any other form of material in the past few years. So if we look on the left, these are all your oil, gas, and coal are your fossil fuels. The on the left, which is blue and gray, and on the right where we see the green colors, this is what they're used for. And if we look at it, it's plastics here in the center, which is the bulk of, or the majority of fossil fuels is used for plastic, fiber, and rubber. So it's already in, this is a 2017 figure. And what we are seeing is that this will increase to 50% of all fossil fuels by 2050. That's what the IEA has estimated. All I'm trying to really highlight and bring here is how this problem really is only increasing and not decreasing. And the more plastics we produce, the more they are in the environment, which have to be dealt with. And the more the government and the industry is going to push to just burn it all and out of sight, out of mind. We don't have to worry about it, anymore, because dumping grounds and landfills are stinky and dirty to look at. So this is a growing problem and something that we're going to have to face more and more in the coming years. Once we look at this was really trying to understand what the Asia Pacific region looks like. It's not particularly pertinent to New Zealand, but it's a matter of concern to the entire region, really, is that in the coming years, we're seeing that with the West being far more stringent with their environmental regulations, a lot of the oil will be shipped to the Asia Pacific region for refining on behalf of the rest of the world. And so we will really be holding the toxicity of production of plastics. And thanks to waste trade, also the disposal of plastics and the toxicity that comes with disposal as well. So for the Asia Pacific, it's not a very encouraging picture at all. We're also seeing that thermoplastics, this is technical, but that doesn't matter. But there's also an increase per capita consumption of plastics in the coming years by about 30%. And this, of course, consumption, we will see later who's spearheading these consumptions and how, how we can do away with this kind of single-use consumption that is being proposed by the industry. We're also looking at a massive, the two bars, CTS, RTS, these are two modelings of, of the future of investments. Basically, one is a business as usual scenario and one is a clean technology scenario. And in both instances, the gray bar on the right is basically the Asia Pacific region. And we're seeing massive money coming into this region for chemical production. So just to drive home the point that the Asia Pacific region is going to really be the cesspool for toxicity, in the coming years. So what happens to all this? I mean, there is more details of polymers, and I don't want to get into much more technical information than this. But what happens then to all the plastics that are being produced and the polymers that are being produced? And we see that more than 45% of polymers or petrochemicals is used in packaging, right? So and this packaging, the one that we're seeing at the bottom, is mostly single-use packaging. Basically, it's what we consume once and throw away. There is, of course, building construction, there is textiles, there are, there's the automobile industry, which uses plastics in a massive way. Of course, the electronics industry, all our computers and phones and all of that. But when we speak to the industry, often they try to say we need plastics because, you use your computer, of course you need plastics. So that's also the kind of propaganda or the distraction tactics that the industry uses to push the point about the need for plastics, while they don't admit that much of the plastics produced is actually flexible packaging, and it goes into the packaging industry, which is usually a single-use industry. So 40% of plastics, of course, in India is 45%, but globally 40% of plastics produced is used for one-time packaging only. It's our crisps that we buy and the cookies that we buy, all the FMCG off the shelf packaging or products that we buy, the shampoos and the soaps, the detergents. It's all of these which are really the biggest consumers of plastics in the world, and all of these are really use and throw or one-time plastics. The BFFP does an annual brand audit, and in the 2021 brand audit report, we saw that these were the 10 biggest plastic polluters, globally. There are different country-specific ones also, but these are the global ones, and you can see that it's mostly, these are basically your FMCGs where you consume. It's either the detergent, industry, or it is your, chocolates and Coke and things like that. Unilever, Nestle, Coca-Cola. These are your top 10 polluters globally. Roughly, so we're seeing that since 2000, there is a big push for plastics, and it's not surprising because we're also seeing it's around the same time that the climate debate also has gained strength, and there is a slowing down of use for oil and gas for energy, and we see an increasing use of these materials for plastics. So we're seeing that since 2000, the year 2000, we've roughly half of all plastic produced was made, and this is only increasing. We're seeing, this is really the shape of the graph. It's almost a vertical climb of plastic production that's happening in the future. And the industry intends to quadruple this by 2050. So if we think we've had a lot of plastics in our life, well, it's only going to increase at the rate that they want it to. The plastic manufacturers or the plastic consuming industry do not see plastic production as a problem. They only see plastic management as a problem. They see plastic as a littering problem and not a production problem. But we know that the fossil fuel industry is an extremely polluting and climate damaging industry in and of itself. So when we calculate plastic pollution, we can't do that only when it's thrown away or it's incinerated, but right from the time that it was, oil was extracted from the ground and sent it to a petrochemical refinery, and plastic pollution, the clock or the timer needs to start from there and not really from the time when it ends up in a landfill. However, we're looking at this in the Global Plastics Treaty that some of you also possibly are a part of, where what the plastic industry understands is upstream. We understand upstream as oil exploration and petrochemical production. The plastic industry understands upstream as just the designing of the product and not the production itself. So the industry does not think that virgin plastic production is a problem. They only think that it needs to be packaged better. There need to be a different set of chemicals put in, and needs to be, of course, burnt better. If you were to look at the plastics industry, the entire life cycle from the the extraction of fossil fuels right up to the end, it is the 5th largest emitter of greenhouse gases in the world. And if plastics was a country, it would be the 5th largest country, emitting greenhouse gases, and that's how harmful the entire plastic life cycle is. So this is, I am hoping I'm drawing a very scary picture, because what we're seeing is things only getting worse. So what happens to plastics once it's consumed? All of you are familiar with the waste to energy, pyrolysis, and regasification, and all that. But what other things are going on is something that we need to see. So the plastic industry has produced plastic waste since 1950, which is 25,000 times the weight of the Empire State Building. I mean, again, this is just to give a context to how much of plastic waste we are producing. And this is just plastic waste. There's all kinds of other wastes that are being produced, apart from plastic waste, the organic waste, nuclear waste, building, debris. So this is just, if you look at the world of waste, it's only a part of that world of waste that we're talking of. And this is how bad it already is. However, only 9% of all plastic waste that has been created has ever been recycled. So when the industry says that recycling is a good solution, that's really, really a myth. Finally, to say that by 2015, about 6,300 million tons of plastics was generated, 9% recycled, 12% incinerated, and 79% in landfills or the natural environment. With an increasing push from even citizenship, from citizens to municipal corporations and governance bodies to do away with these large piles of plastic waste, there is going to be a big push for incineration in the coming days. Japan, in terms of technology, the Asian Development Bank in terms of money, Europe in terms of both money and technology, are really pushing both incineration technology and money into the Asia Pacific region. And we're going to have to be far, far more careful, about this than we've managed to be until now. So this is a systemic problem. This is not just, it's not only in one country or another. We are seeing a shutting down actually of incinerators in Europe, some in the US, but mostly in Europe. But all that is coming along with their waste. All that is coming, so you have the waste, you have the incineration technology, and then you have the money for that coming from Europe, from Japan, and from other places into the Asia Pacific region. And, a collective concerted pushback is something that we need to engage in. Finally, to say that to stop plastic pollution, we're going to have to stop making plastics, and then, dealing with everything else along the chain. That's where I'll end. Thanks for this opportunity, and I'm happy to respond to any questions that you all might have in the matter. Thank you.
Swati, thank you so much. That's fantastic. I'm going to add our other speakers on here as spotlighted, and I will just open this up. There's so much in all of this discussion. It's just incredible, and I just want to take a moment to acknowledge a kind of really the Aotearoa Plastic Pollution Alliance, which is our local sort of our local arm of the Break Free from Plastics movement, really the organized voice of the anti-plastics, the systemic anti-plastics movement in the country, to say this, we're doing this as part of Plastic Free July and the Break Free from Plastics False Solutions campaign. So we're kind of putting the focus specifically on the plastics part of the waste equation today. And Swati, I think that you've really done such a service to us in explaining the kind of link between the end of the pipe and the oil and gas exploration stuff. And I think for me, that's something I really want people to be able to understand, that some of the people who are specifically driving these waste to energy projects are oil and gas. There's not a sort of a disconnect there. There is a very, very specific, we would say whakapapa lineage there, tying all these companies up together. So, and we've just asked, has said one person to ask if you can share your PowerPoint. So perhaps you can send that to me and we can share that with our registered users. I just want to open this up for questions for people. We've got about 15 minutes. If anybody just wants to jump in and ask a question, feel free to unmute and ask a question.
Hello, Brett here from, it's not Reynolds, it's Brett from National Public Health Service, Palmerston North. What was my main question? Oh yeah, so it was really a comment to, obviously we also opposed the Feilding incinerator, and I just mainly like to thank all those involved, the opposition submitters, for their hard work. Yeah, that's my main comment, particularly Angela and you know, the other submitters, and Val and Liam.
Thanks, Brett. Yeah, it's interesting because Valerie talked a little bit about people's health concerns around plastic pollution in the United States. We were very fortunate here in Feilding that the health board, essentially the national organization of our health system, did actually commission an air expert, and that air expert was hugely helpful in helping to defeat the proposal. But I think the plastics pollution stuff in terms of microplastics in the environment, kind of it has become a much greater issue sort of internationally now. But again, there's not that focus what Swati is talking about at the beginning of the pipe. People are talking about recycling, and now they're talking about chemical recycling, and but they aren't talking about stopping production of fossil fuels, which is where this conversation really needs to be. And there's, yeah, in the United States, there's some really startling proposals around plastics to energy stuff that have got health statistics that are, I heard about one proposal, I think was in Louisiana, that was like 1 in 4 people potentially were at risk of cancer. 1 in 4. It's yeah, crazy. So again, just opening this up for questions for any of our speakers. Bruce?
Yeah, Valerie, I just want to quickly ask you whether you have got a small coalition of the mayors. Presumably Chicago has various municipalities within it. And I wondered whether you had been able to assemble the people who opposed the incinerator, because I was in Montreal in the 90s and we defeated the Montreal incinerator there. And one of the key things was that one of the councillors in one of the municipalities gathered others together in strength. There weren't lots of them, but there was a handful of them, and they then could go to the media. You're very good at comms, which is really so important. But the fact that there was not just one crank councillor, but there were several councillors in different places dotted over Montreal. They were together, they were in the media, they were saying, people, this is wrong, and they were given reasons. I wondered whether you've used that, because I think that made quite a difference to our campaign against the Montreal incinerator.
Thanks for that comment. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. There is a kind of there's 3 towns right around the southern corner of Lake Michigan in Indiana. So there's it's being able to show the reach, though. Again, when it comes to emissions are the issue. So it's being able to show the reach of those emissions, and we're always looking for more information so that we can show, yes, people here are going to be impacted by this. It's a bad, we're campaigning on all the issues, the plastics one as well, but it's the emissions issue that really gets people to pay attention. There's also a parochialism, you can't go into another mayor's town and tell them what to do, kind of thing. So, but that all said, yes, I think that is a good idea, and we should be talking to the other mayors, which we haven't done. So thanks for the suggestion.
It wasn't mayors, it was councillors. They were separate.
The councillors.
They were a coalition outside of the city councils they were in. They were just activist people who said, I am a councillor in this municipality. I'm from this one. I'm from this one. We think this problem is a major problem. This problem is a major problem. So we're looking after you. And they went to the media, and the media lapped it up.
Thanks, Bruce. More questions? Bridget.
Not just so much a question. I'm just having a look at this on my computer as well, and I just see that Coca-Cola is just has been given massive expansion to knock down houses in Mount Wellington to expand its factory in Auckland, one of its New Zealand factories. Yeah, and whether, I don't know, I haven't been looking at following your plastics campaign, I must admit, but whether that's something else we can be targeting.
I certainly think that Coke is the largest plastics polluter in the world. I think Greenpeace has been doing a really good campaign here in New Zealand around targeting Coke and particularly the elimination of plastic bottles. And I guess I think it's Lydia Chai is on the call, and I think Lydia is the person who took a petition around the waste trade to Parliament very recently about waste trade, the exports of waste to Southeast Asia. And I guess I just want to draw that really big loop that in New Zealand, you know, we produce a lot of plastics that we have absolutely no ability to recycle in any way, shape, or form within New Zealand. So that means that the very nature of those plastics are that they will be, if they're collected ostensibly for recycling, they will be exported. And this is what Swathi called the cesspool of toxicity that we are, New Zealand and Aotearoa is participating in exporting to Southeast Asia as part of the kind of cycle of plastic waste going around the planet. So I certainly think any expansion of Coke could be a good target. So yeah, I want to hand over to Hannah. Hannah, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question to everyone, and thank you all for your amazing presentations. This has been such a super informative, wide-ranging discussion. One of the things that community groups often face when particularly petitioning to councils and governments to oppose waste to energy incinerators, but also to try and start regulating businesses to switch to more sustainable packaging models and so on, is, well, we've got all this waste or we've got all these systems, what are we going to do instead? And my personal feeling is that it's not actually the responsibility of community groups to solve the problems that industry have caused. So I'm not necessarily asking you for your thoughts on what the solutions are, but I'm asking you what your thoughts are in terms of responding to statements like that, or well, we can't, you know, unless you're going to give us an alternative, we're going to just carry on with what we're doing. Thanks. How can we respond to that in a way that really highlights the urgency of doing something, not just deflecting?
I'll just say something, which is, I think that is the opportunity then to talk about plastics. And that's the opening to begin educating people about plastics. People do not understand that only 9% of recyclables are recycled. They just don't know it. They think things are being recycled. And so in my view, we're at the ground level, we're at the beginning of a very basic education campaign. But that's the opening. That's when you have to start talking about that.
Anybody else want to respond on Hannah's question?
Yeah, I'd like to respond to this, plus the question that had come about legacy waste, which is also an issue. So if we were to look at both of these, I agree with Valerie, where we say it's the opportunity to speak to governments about, really putting their money where their mouth is. And if they're really worried about the waste that's being generated, then to stop adding to those mountains that there are over there. Also raising the question of the number of chemicals that there are in plastics, and that burning simply cannot be a solution, because if we were to burn all those chemicals, all the plastic with all those chemicals, it is obviously going to kill people. And finally, to say that it really is, at least how it is in India, is it's our money that is being spent, to build these incinerators. It's public money, and they can't do what they wish with public money because it's our money, and we don't want our money used to kill us. And that is finally the responsibility of the government and the industry, which has the resources to look at alternatives, which are of some value at all. So these are some of the things that we kind of, bring to the table when we are in conversation with our government representatives.
Apologies, I was on mute. Angela, you got a question there?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment about what was my question? A question to Valerie. Do you have any of the residents input into your group or the Afro-American community? Is there anyone there that you have a contact with whose community will be affected?
We do. And that's obviously having a diverse group is critical to winning. We can't possibly win without it. And so we do have, first of all, everyone in our group lives in Gary. Actually, with the exception of me, I just recently moved to Chicago, but I lived there for 40 years. But everyone lives in Gary, and we have diverse representation in our group, and building on that is actually our #1 priority for this year.
I like the way that, I just wanted to say, I like the way that you keep things in the public eye, because this sort of stuff carries on under the radar, doesn't it? So you keep it publicized and it's out in the public light all the time.
Yeah, I think it's critical. It's a chief education tool.
I just wanted to ask, were there any closing thoughts that any of you all wanted to offer?
Yeah, Brett here again from Palmerston North Public Health. I just missed, sorry, most of the hui, but just wondering, is there any thoughts on supporting the Waimete and Kaipara communities with the, with the those proposals and those, or has that been discussed?
We certainly are supporting those communities, Brett, and we would love to have the support of the District Health Board. And yeah, maybe we can talk with you more about how to go about doing that.
I have
in another environment. Yeah,
I have emailed my colleagues with all the resources that we've had from the Feilding, so that they'll have all our resources basically.
Wonderful.
Because we're part of a national organisation now. So
great.
That's great.
Thank you, mate. And I just wanted to ask our speakers, would you like to offer any closing thought?
I'd just like to say that we would really welcome a relationship with people in New Zealand with regard to Fulcrum, and we can talk later about how to do that. But we know some things that you probably should know, and of course you're going to know things that we need to know. So I really welcome that relationship.
Yeah, kia ora. I just really want to say a huge thank you to all of our speakers today. I think we really could go on for quite some time talking about all of these different kaupapa, as we say, all of these different threads of this conversation, and I think we need to keep things going. But I feel really excited to build some of these relationships between Aotearoa, where we are starting to, I guess, to really feel ourselves on the front lines of the struggle against waste to energy, and some of our comrades in Indiana, but also kind of hooking in with Gaia and Break Free from Plastics and the international community, and particularly in Southeast Asia, because I think as time goes by, Aotearoa New Zealand sees itself more as part of the Asia Pacific and less as part of the old colonial Anglosphere, which is a great change, but also means reorienting ourselves and our politics towards Southeast Asia a bit more and understanding more of the context that's going on there. So thank you all so much for your time today. Really appreciate that. And I just want to close with a karakia to say, and again, to thank and to acknowledge the tangata whenua, the Indigenous people of Aotearoa, for their long-standing kaitiaki, their care for the environment here. So, and thanks to all of our guests and people that have come along to listen to this kōrero today. Unuhia, ki te uru tapunui, kia wātia, kia mama te nāko te tinana me te wairo i te aratakatū. Koia rai e rongo whakiiri a ki runga kia wātia, ai rā, kua wātia, riri ho, pai mariri. Thank you everybody again, and we'll see you again soon. We're having another False Solutions webinar on Friday, discussing composting stuff, and one again in the following week. So please, sorry, the Friday one is discussing compostable packaging and why it's not compostable packaging, and then the following week. So check out the Zero Waste Network's Facebook page for all of those events, and we would love to see you all there. Thank you again to our speakers, and we'll talk soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.